Colleagues, thank you very much for joining. I think this is, it's great we can have this conversation, and it's what Oscar and I had agreed in our introductory meeting, that we should sit down and look at evaluation in more details. It's, for me, always, you know, striking whenever I enter the development context and when I work in the development context, which is not always the case, how much resources are going into evaluations, and how big this machinery is, and how important, what an important element it is, especially in the eyes of the Western donorship. And I see a trend of increasing scrutiny about where the money goes, and I hear it also with in my conversations with parliamentarians, be it European or at the national levels of the donor countries. Now that the fight over money and the competition over money will increase, the questions about how we spend the money on the ground will come more forcefully as well, and the member states in the UNDP executive board have only recently reminded us again that that the evaluation trends in UNDP have not been improving in the last 2 to 3 years. So we need to understand how we can do things perhaps differently or better in the future. We are putting resources. We have gone through a realignment, strengthening both the country support team in Istanbul, the so-called ICOST now, but also the partnership and strategy team in New York under the leadership of both Nicholas Reeder and Ekaterina. I think the two teams work complementary together, and it's much more clear, and I see Katja nodding. I'm glad to see that. It's much more clear who does what. We are also building on past experiences. Tamina continues to work in that field and be our focal point for many things. But I think having Oscar now on board and having a new leadership on your side, Oscar, as well, the most important for us is to hear you collectively, to hear your vision, and then to hear how we can work better even in the future, into also becoming clearer to our donorship on you know, how we measure impact. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. It's really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. Colleagues, good afternoon, good evening. Yes, well, as the new director of the Independent Evaluation Office, I have a few priorities that I would like to share with you. The first one is really related to what Mariana was saying about the context in which we are operating. It is a very competitive context in terms of resource mobilization and in terms of how the national cooperation is addressing the needs of our member states. And I think we need to have a stronger results culture, and that stronger results culture means improving people's lives. When we speak about accountability, there is one level, which is indeed the executive board and our governing bodies. But I think there is another level of accountability, and it's what we do in countries. And how accountable are we to the populations in those countries where the UNDP is operating? And therefore, if we want to be clearer on the impact that we are having through our interventions in people's lives, we need to have a more systematic approach to measuring the results, and that's where evaluation comes handy. We are now going through the COVID-19 crisis that is hitting the world very hard, and RBEC is not an exception. And therefore, we will see how we need to adjust also the conduct of evaluation to the new conditions imposed by the COVID-19 and by the recovery. That's why we wanted to share with you some of our thinking in relationship to how the decentralized evaluations, the ones that are under responsibility of the regional bureaus, and the independent evaluation do complement each other. And how can we make that complementarity stronger for having what I call at least two important feedback loops. The first feedback loop should be coming from the decentralized evaluations, allowing you as RES reps, deputy RES reps, and M&E focal points to identify if the program is really going on track in relationship to the commitments that you have made to the hosting government expressed in the country program document. To what extent is that country program document really accompanied by an evaluation plan? And to what extent is evaluation a management tool for you to see if you are going into the right direction or not? And then the role of the independent evaluation office by having a second learning feedback loop, identifying really broader patterns about what has happened. Last year, we are very grateful because really RBEC has been an exemplary bureau to work with. We have conducted a number of country program evaluations, which are fitting very nicely into the thematic and corporate level evaluations that we are undertaking this year. And we want to thank all of you for your collaboration throughout the process. And finally, as Mariana was saying, this is a good opportunity to establish a dialogue in which we can, but into the substance of the interaction. If you allow me, Mariana, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Richard Jones, who has a brief presentation, after which we would be very happy to go through a Q&A and really start this important dialogue. But once again, many thanks for the invitation. Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much, Oscar, and also thank you, Mariana, for organizing this. As Oscar has mentioned, last year was a considerable period of partnership between RBEC and the IEO, the reverberations of which are still continuing through the thematic evaluations that we are undertaking at the moment. Just to put that in context, I have a short presentation. Please allow me just to set up the technical aspects. Is that okay? Can you see that?
Yes.
So just to put this into a context of where our work, so just going through the presentation this morning, I just look at some of the work IEO has done and in relation to RBEC, looking at the decentralized evaluation because they are important to our work as well as important to your work. And then get some guidance on COVID-19 and what evaluation looks like in the future during and post COVID-19. As you can see, last we had 38 ICPs. It was 3 times as many as we have ever done in the past. And RBEC was a key region for during that period with 12 ICPs. Previously, in the year before, 2018, we had worked with Herzegovina, and I think we just finalized that evaluation with a stakeholder meeting last week. And this year we have an evaluation with Montenegro. But as you can see, the curve is quite a peak next year. While those are highly important for you, obviously, and all of the CPEs that will be accompanying the CPDs when you deliver them to the board this year, to enable the board to see what was done in the past and to ensure that the work going forward takes into account the lessons from previous work. But those evaluations have also to our considerable thematic work that we have on our plate at the moment. We're currently undertaking last year and finalizing this year or next year 6 thematic events. Just allow me to move this. Sorry. Now, the 11, well, there were 12 ICPs last year. 11 of those are going to a synthesis on the work of across RBEC, which will be produced, is being produced now, but will come out sometime next year, and we'll be working closely with you on that. All of this work, given that they are all middle-income countries, have been very important for the evaluation of UNDP's work in middle-income countries, which is going to the board in September. And I think a draft will have been shared through PPPS with you already on that for your comments. The ICP of Turkey has been instrumental in the thematic evaluation for the Syria crisis and human migration, which will be presented to the board in January. And all of this, the ICPs and the thematic work, is informing the strategic plan evaluation, which is currently in its initial phase and will be presented to board in June next year. As another part of our work, and we report annually through our annual reports on evaluation on decentralized evaluation implementation and quality. As Mirjana has mentioned, this is quality and scope of the evaluations at the decentralized level is always an issue of interest to donors, and they are highly interested in why our evaluations, the quality of our evaluations, and therefore the credibility and the usability of our evaluations, as well as the number of evaluations that we are doing. This illustrates last year's implementation of evaluations against the plan. This is not an unusual picture. At the beginning of the year in February, we planned 530 evaluations. By the end of the year, we had only implemented 55% of that, 290. This, as you can see, it's an issue, this is an issue across all regions. And as you can see, 2020, the picture hasn't changed considerably. We are still planning 530 evaluations. And even as of yesterday, I checked the numbers, these had not changed. So even despite COVID, there has not been a change. In fact, we are seeing additional evaluations being added to evaluation. Why does this matter? Well, in one case, it's good that we are showing that we see evaluation is important, that we are placing it, planning for several evaluations across our programs. The problem is we are not implementing accordingly. As a result, by the time we get to the end of the year, JEF, midterm reviews and terminal evaluations are accounting for 43% of our evaluations. About 7% are outcome and CPD thematic evaluations, and the remaining are project or program evaluations. Which is a worry because the question is raised, are we actually implementing the work that we do, or are we implementing evaluations of mandatory evaluations over other types of evaluations? Looking at individual countries, this is just for your information. You can see a hugely varied picture across RBEC. Around the average is 60%. Some have added more. So for instance, RBEC at the beginning of the year had planned 2 evaluations in February last year. In the end, 6 were done. Pardon me. The same picture in Serbia and other places. Now, at present, again, I looked at the figures yesterday. With only 68 evaluations planned in 2020, so far 13% have been completed for the year, 9 evaluations, with 18% overdue. That's 12 evaluations. You might argue, well, COVID is the reason behind that, but in fact, this is actually the normal picture that we see for the year. The first half of the year, we're very slow at implementing evaluations. Last year was exactly the same picture. By June, only 13% of evaluations had been completed globally. And the problem is we end up back-ending most of our evaluations. And as a result, because in the last quarter of the year, we see a lot of other pressures on offices, we actually see evaluations being cancelled or transferred to the following year. In RBEC, I think 52% of all of your evaluations are actually planned for the last quarter of the year, October, November, and December, which is sort of peak reporting time for raw IRRFs. So often we see a shift of evaluations, a constant movement forward of evaluations. Now, this is an issue for the board because this represents a change from a commitment given to the board. Evaluation plans accompany the CPD. They're a commitment to the board to oversee your programs, to use evaluations for management purposes, to ensure that we're accountable and we're drawing lessons. And as we move or delete or cancel evaluations, it means we're not keeping that commitment that we have given at the beginning of the program to the board to evaluate the work that we do. Again, as mentioned by Oscar and Mariana, quality is always raised as an issue by the board. And well, it's raised as an issue because we raise it as an issue. As Oscar mentioned, decentralized evaluations are important for our work as well as your own work because they feed into our ICPEs. The problem that we're finding is not only is the number decreasing or low and decreasing, but actually the quality is not especially great. We annually quality assess all the evaluations done by UNDP, and we find that only 20 to 25% globally actually meet our quality standards. By far the majority are in the moderately satisfactory range, which means they have a number of constraints, which impacts their usability and credibility, if you like. Now, this has been a constant discussion with the board over the last few years, and we haven't stood still. We've worked with UNDP on a number of tools to try and raise the bar and raise the quality of evaluation. This has included the release of evaluation guidelines last year, then a rollout throughout the year at the regional level of training on those, based on those guidelines, which included training last February with RBEC, which saw 51 participants from all countries in RBEC at the time. We also have done a number of webinars, and we continue to produce updates on those guidelines. Supporting this as well, we also have recently launched last week 2 sets of online training. One is a basic introduction, which is about an hour and a half, which is available to everybody. Well, both courses are available to everybody. And the second training is a certified training, which is available, which covers the guidance in detail. And that is mandatory training for all M&E officers across the globe. Just to give you an update, so you know, so far over 200 people have actually completed both courses within a month, with 18 coming from RBEC, which actually is very good. It's only been launched for a month, but we will be calling for all M&E focal points and officers to have completed the larger training, the certified training, by October. And we will be monitoring this and chasing this. So that's a picture of where we stand with decentralized evaluation. Obviously, COVID has caused a number of challenges to everybody, not least of all to evaluation. We were quick to release in March some guidance for you. Well, it was a guidance for ourselves, actually, as well as for bureaus and for country offices. And they are built around 6 principles. So I'm just going to touch on 4 here today. One is that moving forward, we should have a principle of do no harm and safety first. And that is evaluation shouldn't bring anybody into any danger from COVID-19, consultants, stakeholders, UN staff, government partners. Second plan is to rethink our current evaluation plans and reconfigure evaluation teams accordingly. Now, we did this ourselves. We cut back our ICPs for this year from 26, I believe, or 28, down to 16, because practically we saw that we weren't going to be able to travel. We were going to have to do evaluations remotely. People were busy with COVID-19 tasks, and as a result, we scaled back some of our work. And we did a criticality assessment of those evaluations and rescheduled accordingly. Now, of course, given the travel constraints, this also means that we're not going to be able to use the teams that we normally would use. So we have given guidance on rethinking evaluation teams and methodologies. What does this mean? Considering using more national consultants, desk reviews, placing more of a focus on data analysis and desk reviews, and then virtual evaluations or remote interviews with stakeholders. This is what we are doing in many cases. We are interviewing government partners, CSOs remotely through Skype and Zoom and different things. And where possible and where safe to do so, we are using national consultants. Now, as a process going forward, and this is not new, this is something we were advocating in April, and it's something we outlined in a webinar to all the M&E focal points in April, and there's a guidance note supporting this. We were advising back in April that you should review your evaluation plans with a focus on an assessment of criticality of those evaluations. What really needs to be done to support your management decision making. Now in July, it's essential that we do this because it hasn't been done. Now, going forward, looking at your plans, in many cases, evaluations could be combined, especially where they have similar thematic areas. We're saying reschedule rather than cancel. So if possible, some could be moved towards the end of the year, but we want to avoid bunching. And approaches may need to be changed. As mentioned, you might want to consider now using national evaluators, either working on their own or with support from international evaluators who are working remotely. For vertical funds, there are different guidance, and Margareta is online to answer any questions there. But there we cannot combine evaluations. All virtual funds still need their own MTRs or terminal evaluations. They can be delayed, but you need to discuss that with regional technical advisors. Now, within the guidelines, there's an evaluability checklist. So you should not be moving forward with evaluations until all of them have actually met the requirements under that evaluability checklist. And that is a clearly articulated theory of change, well-defined results, and sufficient data for the evaluation going forward. So even given a criticality assessment and a rescheduling and a combining, if you don't have these pieces in place, it's going to make it even more difficult to implement these evaluations remotely. Now, moving forward to our planning ahead, this is key. This is a major period in UNDP's existence. This is an unprecedented crisis, and it is an opportunity to start to reprioritize our work in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. However, we should start to consider evaluation going forward. Evaluative evidence on what works and what doesn't should be collected and analysed, and will contribute to the response and recovery work that's done in the future, and will help to shape the SDG efforts going forward. Partnerships with key players beyond the UN will be important to keep evaluation meaningful and relevant. I understand UNCT has already issued guidance on socio-economic plans alongside the UNDP plans, and there's already details on monitoring and indicator data that should be collected, both at the UNCT level, and UNDP is releasing guidance on monitoring data in the next week or so. Country offices and regional bureaus should be recording those initiatives now in response to the crisis, and this means documenting decision-making and especially reprogramming where that happens, so that there's a rationale behind why we are doing the work that we are doing, and therefore we can capture the lessons from that work and it can inform our work going forward. Ensure COVID-19 support and responses have clearly defined theories of change that link the work to government responses and the work of other UN agencies. And as mentioned, We should be collecting data, targets, and data to support the achievements of our COVID-19 work and reprogramming work. And I understand UNDP is releasing indicator guidance next week. And finally, don't put evaluations on the shelf. Use them for your management decision making. Now, as one of the key elements of our work, IEO's work, this is exactly what we have done. We've taken our evaluations off the shelf, and we've taken our decentralized evaluations off the shelf, and we have produced, we've taken from those evaluations key lessons across 4 areas: health systems, livelihood restoration, social protection, and strengthening governance. And we've released a number of papers that highlight those the lessons that we can learn from previous crises to inform our work going forward. And we have a number of other pieces on elections, biodiversity and ecosystems, and municipal governance support that are coming out in the future. With that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. Oscar, would you like to add anything here?
No, Richard, we're ready for the Q&A. Over to you, Mariana.
I always forget to turn off or turn the microphone on. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was very clear. I would like to invite you to ask questions or provide some comments, colleagues. I know we've been discussing these issues over the past weeks. Perhaps start with Agi. Agi, I see you're online.
Thank you very much, Mariana, Oscar, and colleagues. It's very good to hear from you. I actually don't have anything to add. We have gone through a very good process of talking to the colleagues about the evaluation that were done. So perhaps just that consideration of how we go about once a draft evaluation is done, and when we see some sensitivities or some comments that we may feel that's not fully substantiated, that we have this process and dialogue between the Bureau and the Evaluation Office to make sure that we end up with a product that will actually be helpful for us and also not creating enormous political sensitivities. So that is very much appreciated, and I hope that we can continue in the process, especially on the independent evaluations. So just that observation. Otherwise, we have a very good cooperation, and looking forward to some of the new visions that Oscar you put forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Agi. Oscar, I have a few more questions. Let me finish at least the first round and then hand over to you and Richard. First, Ekaterina, then Luis, and then Anna. Katja, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you, Oscar, also for introduction, and Richard for the presentation. I think our cooperation with IEO has been not just successful, but very, very useful and informative for our programs and projects. And last year experiment with the ICP was quite interesting. I think we got lots of lessons learned from that. One thing that came up during the last several years was this famous conference of national evaluation capacities. We have received a number of questions from country offices in the past whether this initiative will continue or not, and what is the perspective of IEO on that. And the second question that came up is majority of evaluators, of course, evaluation advisors are sitting in New York and in the evaluation office. Are there any plans for decentralizing this function to the regional hubs? And if so, then what's the perspective of that? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Katja. Luis, in Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you so much. Very helpful presentation and very nice with you today.
Luis, you're great.
Two questions. One is
Luis,
the 2.0. Can you hear me?
Can you turn off your
microphone? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I hear you better, but turn off your camera. It might be even.
No. Hello?
Yes. Okay. Luis, let me move over. Luis, we don't hear you. Luis, we don't hear you. Turn off your camera. I'll come back to you. Let me move over to Anna and I'll come back to Luis. Anna, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Richard, and greetings to all the colleagues. Richard, it's a very practical question. Thanks a lot for your presentation. In one of the slides, you mentioned that we need to revise theory of change while reprogramming. So a practical question is that we are adding additional outputs to the existing projects. This is how most of the countries are dealing with the additional funding for COVID. So does it mean that we need to make changes in the project documents and then re-sign the project documents with our partners? This would be quite a cumbersome process. Just to clarify this, this on your slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And colleagues, please also see Valeria's question, whether there's clarity on the ICP evaluations plan for 2021. Valeria, would you like to add anything to that?
Hello, colleagues, and thanks for the insights provided. Moldova Country Office is speaking as linked to the ICPE, which is planned for 2021, are some of the processes planned for 2022, for example, outcome evaluations. So would like very much to know whether there are some plans for the ICPs planned for 2021 so that we adjust our evaluation plans for this year. Thank you very much.
And then before I hand over to Luis, because she's restarting her internet, Vitali, I see your questions. Would you like to come in?
Yes, hello colleagues. Thank you, Mirjana. Good to see everyone. We had a very productive, very rich experience in our independent country program evaluation. I see Yogesh on the screen. It was a very useful process for the office, informed our CPD. However, my question was, what can we do to improve the quality of those doing the decentralized evaluation? So not when you are doing them, when you're running them, moving from the previously done ADRs to currently, ICP is done really by your staff, by evaluation office staff. So that has been a shift and a visibly qualitative shift. But then decentralized evaluations, I don't know. For example, the EU, they have this result-oriented, or how do they call them, missions, and for which they use a certain number of companies that are pre-selected, I think, and vetted by the European Commission and their auditors. So can we do something like this in the long run? Over. Thank you.
Thanks, Vitali. So Luis, back to you. Are you online?
New attempt. Can you hear me?
Much better.
Okay. Okay, 3 quick questions. Number 1, evaluability of the COVID response itself. We have a 2.0 offer with pretty clear 4 dimensions of UNDP's response, and we are reprogramming in accordance with this. Do you have some simple framework of monitoring templates so that we can make it easier for staff to integrate monitorability or evaluability into programming so that we can update theories of change, etc., in accordance with your recommendations? Question 2, any criteria or recommendations on how we reprioritize? I noticed that we have, as Kyrgyzstan, 6 evaluation planned. It looks like too many for us considering where we are. So how should we think about this? Should we start with the ones that we left over from last year? But is it just feasibility or any other advice? And the third question is, I really like the idea of local evaluators working with guidance from, let's say, overseas, and building maybe on Vitali's question, do we have a roster of people that we can then go with for desk tasks overseas so that we don't have to spend time on that? But also, do you have any sample terms of reference on what could be the roles and responsibilities of the international versus the national in such a situation? Over.
Thanks, Luis and Oscar. Richard, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, colleagues. Indeed, a very good set of questions. To Aji's comment, yes, indeed. Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. To Aji's comment, yes, indeed, we are aware that we are operating in a political environment. Therefore, we take a serious consideration of the political sensitivities in our reports, and any feedback on that is coming, and I think that is a good way to continue the collaboration. On Katarina's comment, thank you very much for recognizing that it was a useful cooperation, as also mentioned by Vitaly. We hope that when we conduct evaluation, this is an opportunity to reflect really together about what is working, what is not working, and identify ways of improving. You know, we do these evaluations in a very rigorous way, very impartial way. We listen to a number of stakeholders whom you do interact, but they keep a relationship with you on a daily basis. Therefore, they are not so blunt in their assessment, and that's why our synthesis of this feedback in terms of how you have contributed to the development results is extremely useful for informing your new strategies and so on. On the question on the National Evaluation Capacities Conference, yes, we will continue them. This is an important area for IEO. And now we are embarking into a partnership with the World Bank, with the independent evaluation group of the World Bank, to have a broader coalition called the Global Evaluation Initiative to support national evaluation systems, and to do that with additional and substantial resources, combining not just the efforts of the World Bank and UNDP, but also a number of donors are coming into a trust fund to support national evaluation capacities. So you will hear more about that. And then the NEC conferences will be conducted in 2021 in the context of, in 2022, in the context of this new partnership with the World Bank. On decentralization, yes, we are thinking very carefully about how can we strengthen the quality of decentralized evaluations. I know that my predecessor, England, was very clear on the move from IOE to decentralized. I'm a bit more hesitant because of the COVID-19 that has made us rethink some of the approaches. We will have a more dedicated approach to the regions, but I'm not sure if we are going to be deploying staff of IEO immediately. That may come in a phased approach, and we are precisely discussing that internally. On the theory of change and reprogramming, Anna, a very good question. I think it's, I will, of course, give the floor to Richard to answer the difficult parts of it. But in my opinion, you should not rewrite the project document. I think it's not necessary. What is very important is that you keep on record the changes that you are making, even by adding new outputs or outcomes into the rationale of the project, that you keep on record how this change has been made and the priorities that have been done. Luis asked if there are criteria for reprioritizing the evaluation plans. That's a very good question. In our view, this COVID-19 offers an opportunity to rethink what is absolutely needed. And that is how we can make the evaluation plans more a managerial tool. I will not go with an approach of what is missing in terms of compliance, but really what is missing in terms of orienting your actions. Where do you need more feedback? Is it in your governance program? Is it on your environmental domain? Is it more on your work on livelihoods and supporting youth employment? I don't know. And therefore, those utility criteria should be applied into the reprioritization. On the issue of consultants, yes, we are aware that the quality of ICPs has improved considerably when those are under the lead of our staff in IEO. And now, with the COVID-19, we are seeing how to complement that capacity. We will continue being on the lead by using more national evaluation capacity. That can be translated into national think tanks, academic institutions, or consultants. And for that, we will continue moving towards a vetted process. And on the plan evaluations for 2021, the new ICPEs for 2021, the most important criteria is utility again. And what do we mean by utility is that they feed into your programming cycle. The evaluations that will be undertaken in 2021 are the ones in which your country program document will need to be approved by the Executive Board in 2022. You know that conducting evaluation is a major undertaking for you and for us. And therefore, we need to make the best use of that. That means that it needs to be synchronized and in a timely manner with what the decision-making is required. So all those country programs that will need to be approved by the board in 2022 will have evaluations in 2021. That's the main criteria. And then, of course, we will do more consultations with you as times approach. But let me now hand over to Richard to answer the difficult questions.
Thank you, Oscar. I'll try to answer some of these. Vitaly, this is your comment on access to quality evaluators. This is a constant complaint, if you like, and a request for support. So just to let you know, there's a couple of things in process at the moment that you may not know of. BPPS have started a process of developing a vetted roster. There was already a vetted roster with crew, but they have a criteria now for evaluators, and that should be, I think they're in the process of reviewing and vetting those evaluators now. So that is available for you to use in the next couple of months. You can use the Evaluation Resource Center. If you log into that, you can search evaluator names by quality of evaluations previously done. So there's a tool there for you to vet the quality before you hire people. And we are considering how we can strengthen the evaluators that we use going forward, whether that's having them do training in the same way as our M&E staff do training, or at least have a minimum set of key skills that we want to see. But we're considering that. But going forward, there's a vetted roster being developed, and the ERC does have some names in there. Just going through now on the COVID 2.0. The monitoring templates we do not develop. They are being developed by the effectiveness group, and I understand they have two things in process at the moment. They have, and I think you've seen them, they have something which they're calling a mini RAW, which is an additional set of questions which will address response to COVID within the RAW. And the second is indicators. Now, I've already seen UNCT and UNDCO have produced quite detailed indicators for all UNCTs, and they've identified key components that UNDP is responsible for. And I think falling out of that, UNDP and BPPS are also producing more detailed monitoring indicators that you will need. However, these will always be at a higher level. And for specific COVID responses in your country, you're going to need to develop your own monitoring data to ensure that you're meeting the goals that you set yourself. Anna, as Oscar already mentioned, no, we don't envisage any project documents being changed, but it's key that we document why we are making the changes, why we are going in the directions that we are going. Louise, on your point, your other point about the evaluability and feasibility, we framed most of our guidance for this year, but that is not to say that you don't look at the remainder of the period of your evaluation plan as a whole. So this year and next year, to identify, well, your first thing is JEF evaluations have to be done. That you cannot get away from this. They cannot be combined. They can be delayed, but they still will need to be done, because we're accountable to an external source of funding in the GEF vertical funds. But then you can look at the body of evaluations you have remaining. And exactly as Oscar said, where you started 2 or 3 years ago with your CPD is not where you may be now. And therefore the evaluations may not meet your management needs going forward. So it's good to reflect on the programs that you are developing, you're reprogramming, and then adjust your plan accordingly going forward. On guidance for local guidance for, we've just released last week several pieces of guidance, and one of those is on how to adjust terms of reference. So one is on how to adjust terms of reference taking into account COVID, and the other piece of guidance was a reflection piece on the challenges, if you like, on remote evaluations and using national consultants to implement evaluations, and the possibility of partnership with international consultants. Going forward, we'll develop some framework terms of reference examples, but at the moment we haven't done that, but we have guidance on how to develop terms of reference and how to take into account COVID-19. I think that covers most of the questions for now, unless there are more, of course.
Thank you, Richard. We have one more question from Charu.
Thank you, Mariana. Charu from UNDP Azerbaijan. Thank you. We did the ICPE, which was very well received here at the country. Just a quick question following up from my colleagues. Post COVID-19, we still have the restrictions in place on movement, on travel. However, we still have to also conduct a number of important project evaluations, which are already due. And of course, we are doing most of them virtually without mentioning it. It's obviously going to be done virtually, but we would love to receive some additional guidance from IEO, tools, webinars on how we can twin what we have at a national level, what the best we can do in terms of an evaluation with also the international expertise that exists. That would be very useful for us because we are kind of now stuck in a very important part of having to do evaluations, but we face a lot of constraints where the evaluator actually cannot come into the country, can't see the projects, of course can meet with beneficiaries via Zoom, but there's an issue of monitoring and effectiveness and the quality. So some quick guidance and tips to make sure that we country officers still follow some of the guidelines would be most appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Charu. This is a very good question. And indeed, we have just released guidance on that, very specifically on how to conduct evaluations remotely. And you will see that first, since you cannot travel, you will need to expand the scope of your desk review and do desk review accessing to additional sources that you have not done in the past, including sources from other development partners, either the regional banks or bilaterals and so on that you did not access before. But also in terms of the data collection itself, particularly when the countries of the projects are implemented in remote areas, use of alternative ways of documenting progress, including pictures, videos, satellite imagery. You know, we need to be creative, and we are all learning by doing this. Having said that, it is important at the end when you write the report to have a note on the reliability of your data and be open and transparent about which data is more reliable than others and express the limitations and really undertake that. But, and Richard will expand on this, we are developing these guidelines based on our own experience as well. And these are new territories for many of us, but as long as you document what you're doing, I think the credibility of what you're doing still remains. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. No, exactly. So there's a guidance piece which we launched last week, which I'm happy to resend to you, which, as Oscar said, reflects on our own experience over the last 2 months in doing this. We are not exchanging like for like. We're exchanging, you know, the way we did evaluations before and how we are doing them now. It comes with a different set of challenges, and those challenges in turn bring about credibility issues. And And we are honest about that. We're open, and you need to be as well. As long as you express that within the terms of reference and then within the final report. However, and within that guidance, there may be therefore a need to change the focus of the evaluation. That you know, maybe we're looking more at efficiency, process-based work because we can't address things in the field. Going forward, though, it's key. Let's be honest. Let's be very honest. We're not a good organization at collecting good monitoring data, and we don't document our work very well, and we don't document our especially decision changes, very well. That's why we are calling now, going forward, for us to do that properly. Because going forward, this is not going to, it's going to improve, but it's going to improve, the situation is going to improve slowly. So new programs and reprogramming needs to be documented well. The data we will need to both monitor and evaluate needs to be identified early, and means to collect that data needs to be done identified as early as possible in order for us to capture those lessons in the future. Otherwise, 18 months down the line, we'll find ourselves in the same situation with nothing to base our evaluations on, or to have monitored our programs properly against.
Let me quickly add that there will be efforts to collectively evaluate the impact of COVID and the UNDP response and the UN response. We are engaging into joint initiatives with the multi-party trust fund for the COVID-19 established by the Secretary General. IEO is part of the coalition. We are part also of a global coalition with EvalNet partners from the bilateral donors, and also coordinating with our UNEC colleagues. And there are always these three spheres of the health sector, the humanitarian sector, and the development sector. And in the development sectors, of course, UNDP is the lead, and that will also happen from the front of evaluation. That's why, as much as you can keep record of what you are doing, that will really enhance and try to establish baselines. What was the situation when you started now in response to the COVID-19? Whatever figure that you can provide will be very useful when in months' time we start an evaluative effort collectively.
Sorry, Mariana. I see we have Hanayo from BPPS on here online, and she's just left a response. I'm wondering if I can put her in the hot seat, and because this is a key area, monitoring data and oversight. I wonder if she would like to.
Colleagues, I will have to make a sharp end in 5 minutes because I have another call. I'm very happy to give the floor to Hanayo and then 1 minute to Sukrop as well, but let's wrap up quickly. Otherwise, I'm happy to hand over to you, Oscar, if you want to take more time in this conversation. Hanayo. No. Hanayo?
Sorry, it was unmute. I needed to unmute, sorry. Thank you so much for the opportunity to jump in. We are greetings from BPPS. We really work closely with IEO colleagues on a daily basis to try to enhance UNDP's evaluation functions and usability of evaluations. It's a powerful tool. I hear lots of questions around the COVID-19 and monitoring of COVID-19. I just wanted to update you that we have been developing in close collaboration with regional bureau colleagues and academic colleagues to develop the really meaningful indicators, a set of indicators to monitor UNDP's COVID-19 work. And it's very sizable amount of indicators, and it's part of the UNCT framework. So we are not double work. We are contributing to UNCT, but we are also building our own indicators, which will be, it's under the senior management of BPU, and it will be shared, finalized in a couple of weeks, very soon. We are also developing a COVID-19 mini raw, which is very light, which lots of questions are optional, and only a couple of paragraphs that country office need to report on in terms of success and challenges, and importantly, what would be the demand for the short term, medium term, and long term. And this is going to complement the indicators data with a qualitative narrative coming from the field, very light, and we will be using artificial intelligence to analyze really the qualitative information coming from the field, which will be available on the COVID-19 monitoring dashboard, so that all the UNDP colleagues from the regional bureaus, IEO, country offices can start monitoring what's really happening beyond financial independence. So that's about COVID-19. And in terms of the project document revisions, and Oscar and Richard mentioned, it's very important to document, because we are using the framework of existing project, which has been agreed with the government and the partners. If we are amending some of the scope, it's very important to document. So it doesn't have to be a whole revision project document, but again, it's important to document. And if, for instance, indicators have changed or the targets need to be adjusted, it needs to be documented. I stop here.
Thank you, Hanayo. Can I immediately hand over to Sukrop?
Thank you, Mariana. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, and thanks, Oscar, for organizing such a great event today. We really enjoyed this one, and of course, it was really informative. One comment. Recently, we have reviewed the draft of the evaluation report about the program of UNDP in the middle income countries, which we found very interesting, and it is also going beyond this set of the good recommendation. One of them is about we need more info sharing, we need to more networking, we need to know about the different countries and about different practices. Is it any other evaluation reports are planning, by LA, in order, to prepare and share specifically maybe for least development countries, post-conflict countries, and etc. Over.
Mariana, you're muted.
Sorry, over to you, Oscar.
Yes, we are conducting an evaluation of UNDP's support to adaptation to climate change. That would be extremely important, particularly for the region. Another one on conflict, and of course the Syrian refugee crisis. These three, plus the small grants program. So you will hear from us, certainly. And I'm glad that you find the mixed evaluation useful, because you are operating in a number of them. Over to you, Mariana.
Thank you, Oscar. I'm sorry we are running out of time. I also see, I think Agi also had to leave in the meantime. But let me ask you, how do we take this forward? There seems to be a high interest. We used to have one annual review meeting within INRAN in the past, but now COVID is changing everything. Perhaps we can agree on maybe before the end of the year, reserve another hour just to make sure that we have followed up on everything that has been discussed today. What do you suggest?
Certainly, and we would also like to collaborate in the next iteration of new country program documents, so that we can provide our input into the PAC committees, into the PAC meetings, so that we ensure that the lessons from the past are being taken forward. But another meeting before the end of the year would be great, Mariana. We can coordinate that with your staff.
I think Katja is raising her hand. I think our teams will inform us as to when and on what. I'm flexible, but just to make sure that we commit to having this close dialogue in the future and compare notes regularly. Katja.
Very quickly, Mariana. Yes, indeed. That's what I wanted to suggest, that our teams, we will work it out with IO. One of the ideas was to have a virtual coffee on a monthly basis, to create a space for evaluation focal points to come and ask questions that we can do, considering the time difference and stuff. But then obviously the issues of strategic importance, where I think this dialogue would be extremely important. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Oscar, I'm here. Whenever we need to come in, I think we will, but we also do not want to micromanage or interfere unnecessarily in something that is functioning. But it was also very informative for me. in spite of my time constraints, I just wanted to give you a feedback from my side as well. I do hear you, Richard, on documenting changes and decisions and changes in decisions. I think this is key. It's also something I greatly missed when I joined the organization, because you only feel it when you are new. That it's really difficult to understand the past, because there's no clear place to go to see why decisions were taken in certain ways. And so I thank you for flagging that. I also thank you for flagging the utility of evaluations. I think this is key. They cost a lot of money, and they can do a lot of good, but also a lot of damage, Oscar. And I think the issues that Aggie raised in the beginning are extremely important. RBEC is a highly politicized environment in all aspects. I mean, it's not the typical development context, and every word you write may cause a lot of turmoil. And so there we have to work closely together, in respect also of your independence, of course, but be aware of implications. But I also think thematic evaluations are great opportunities, but if not done correctly, can do a lot of damage as well. And I'm following now the middle income evaluation in particular, because part of our success in the future will be how we pitch our work in middle income context, and how we make our member states, and especially donor states, understand why it's important that we have a large presence and work in these contexts as well, and what the future of development cooperation will look like. And the MIC context is essential to this conversation. And all this is tied to the quality of evaluators, and you've heard colleagues. I mean, and thank you for taking this up and taking this seriously. I think it can be stressed enough. And with this, I just want to thank you again. I think we have a very good spirit and atmosphere that we want to maintain, and I look forward to working with you, Oscar, and your entire team.
Likewise, it was a real pleasure. We do look forward to working with all of you, and please stay safe. Let's continue the communication. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, thanks so much, and thanks for your engagement and interest. I look forward to the next session. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.